Greetings, friends. It is October. Welcome back to the ecoChristian podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Cray Haynes. We're exploring what it means to be Christian on planet Earth in a season that really makes you slow down right now. And if you're sharing this part of the globe with me, things are getting darker, things are getting colder, and it's reminding you to slow down a little bit, to kind of undo. Maybe you're getting a little groggy a little early, and you know what? That's okay. And recently I was thinking about how me and some friends, we had this prayer group late on a Thursday night back in the day, and there was this one friend who would just, inevitably blur the lines between like prayer and napping, and which was fine. It's like what we needed. We'd be like, amen, and look over, and this friend would like still have his eyes closed and would be laying on the couch horizontally, and you're like, oh, he's asleep. But that's okay, because that was the gift. That was the gift of the moment. Sometimes we just need that ministry. By the way, if you haven't heard of the nap ministry, I gotta get these folks on this podcast, because they're doing such cool work, and thinking about the work of the ministry of taking a nap, as an expression of decolonialism. Man, there's so much there, right? Fighting against this idea of overproductivity, and we just sort of consume ourselves to death with the expectations of the way that we think about our work week and that sort of thing. Total side tangent, but it just had me thinking recently also about how Winnie the Pooh was just such a prophet in that regard, right? I mean, if you've ever read any of Winnie the Pooh or watched any of the films, right? I mean, that bro is just living at his own pace. He is just enjoying his life, taking some naps, eating some honey, living off the land. Right? He's an inspiration to those of us who are fighting against that system, isn't he? So, ironically, I feel, here's how this connects. I've been on kind of a personal journey around the word intention and what it means to have specific intention in the work that we do and the efforts toward ecological care that we are on, and so this idea of intention and rest, right? These are not in opposition, but they are complementary to one another. And I think if we can find a balance between the intentionality of how we use our time and what we do and the efforts we make, it also affords us, I think, great rest. But there's also lots of gray area there. Anyway, I want to introduce you guys to a friend today of mine who is saturated with intention, and her name is Crys, and she has lots of good things and nuggets to share with us. And so I want to just jump into this conversation that I had with her recently and let it speak for itself. Okay, friends, I'm here with my friend Crys Zinkiewicz, and how are you today?
Well, I'm fine, thank you. I know that's the expected answer, and sometimes I rail against it because, no, I'm not fine.
That's right. We're all a mix of many different things. So,
but today I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, that's what's up. It's really great that we're getting that fall weather in Nashville. So Crys and I, we had planned a in-person brunch situation today, but because there's some illness floating around, we're playing it safe over Zoom. But we're gonna do that later. But So is there an origin to Zinkiewicz there? Is there, do you know
Well,
what
it's
the...
Polish. It's
It's Polish. Okay.
Polish. And Ed's grandparents immigrated from Warsaw and came to the United States. I'm not sure what year, but had 12 kids and lived in Dayton, Ohio. And
Wow.
Ed's dad was one of those 12.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's a house full.
Yes.
That's the cheaper by the dozen situation.
Ned always said his grandmother did not speak English, but she spoke mother. So whenever the kids came, she'd grab them by the arm and take them out to the kitchen and give them cookies. So,
I love that.
he remembers most.
I love that. Well, friends, Crys here has worked in publishing, primarily focusing on curriculum for youth over 30 years. She's got a long career as an editor in the United Methodist Publishing House, which kind of gave her a rich understanding of the needs and challenges in local congregations. In 2019, Crys took part in the Earth Keepers program at the UMC Mission, and it's just a wonderful program that the United Methodist Church does. And she's a writer for the Creation Justice Creation Care Tips, which is, I would describe as a monthly practical newsletter offering tips toward environmental sustainability to just loads of people. It's so great. And the goal there is to provide theologically and biblically sounded ideas that can be utilized in any congregation and context, worship bulletins, church media, and that sort of thing. Also have a note that Crys is a passionate about gardening, and I've heard horses, so you can sort of, I'd love to hear about that. And she holds a Bachelor of Arts in English from the Ohio State University and a Master of Arts in Christian Education from Scarrett graduate school here in Nashville. So did I miss anything there? Did that sound kosher?
That sounded pretty great. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I feel like I saw something where you have a book about horses or something.
Yes, I was a volunteer for Saddle Up, which is a therapeutic riding program for kids with disabilities. Mm-hmm. And as a volunteer, one of the things that I did was connect with a particular horse. And one day, he was just an interesting, funny horse, and really a good one in many ways. And one day I said, somebody should write a book about Saddle Up from the perspective of Hershey. And of course, when you point a finger, 3 fingers point back to you. I don't know if you've ever thought of that image before, but as soon as I said it, I knew I was destined.
Yeah.
So I wrote it, and we self-published because what we wanted to do was raise the money to go to Saddle Up. And kind of a nice side effect was 3 people who bought the books became volunteers for Saddle Up too. So
that's cool.
It was great fun.
Oh, that's really fun.
I knew I could write kind of normal stuff.
Yeah.
But trying to place myself into the mind of Hershey was a challenge. I thought, can I really do this? And you don't lose anything if you don't try. So I tried, and I found myself really enjoying speaking for Hershey.
Oh,
but
that's so much fun.
He was definitely the inspiration for all the stories. They were every one of them was grounded in something that was real. With she and with some of the other horses too.
That's super cool. That's super cool. Yeah. So Crys and I, we met, that's maybe over a year ago over coffee, and we were chatting with another friend about a book project that she's working on. And, and I found out that you were the mastermind behind the United Methodist Church Creation Justice Tips, which is just so impressive. And I want to chat about those, but I'd love here to spend some time just hearing more about your story, and your story with Ed, and as I understand, you've been involved in the work of Creation Care for some time, and so Yeah, it'd be wonderful if you'd be willing to share a bit more about your journey and kind of how you got here.
Well, it started over Monday night dinner. Our family, way back in the 80s, got together for Monday night dinner. And then it kind of grew and expanded and contracted and so forth over the decades. But one of the persons who came to dinner was Claire. And Claire would frequently, at least from time to time, bring up the idea of her concern about global warming and climate change. And, I'm busy fixing dinner, so that goes right straight over my head. However, she planted a seed. Mm-hmm. I got involved with West End United Methodist Church and their creation care team. And as such, I went ahead and heard that there was going to be a creation care summit here in Nashville in 2019, in July of 2019. So I signed up for that, and I thought to myself, okay, it's just down the street. I don't have to fly any place. I won't be using up any miles in terms of gasoline for going to a conference. I should probably go to that. I can sleep in my own bed. It'll be fine. Well, it's my life.
And, I remember that conference because my friend Jason and I were planning one for the Church of the Nazarene, and so we heard that one was going on, and so we snuck in for like a couple hours just to scope out the situation, and it was really well done.
Good. Well, no, number one, you need to know that you're never sneaking in. You're always invited to a United Methodist event. So there.
Oh, that's awesome.
But what I found was that was my wake up. I did not. Claire had planted the seeds, but I didn't register that somebody else wasn't going to take care of it. And I didn't register about the urgency of it. So I came out of that with two things. One was that I did wake up in the middle of the night with an idea. And it was like, really? Okay, who said that? And the idea was based on my experience at West End, where somebody had written creation care tips in the worship bulletin. And then that somebody moved away, so they were gone. But I thought to myself, I can do that. And that's a way to help people sitting in the pews begin to make connections between taking care of the climate and the issues related to climate change and how that fits with faith. So when I went to the second day of the conference, I happened to connect in a small group with Kathy Velasquez Everhard, and she ultimately became this kind of the facilitator of the growing United Methodist Creation Justice movement. Right. So out of that, so I got two things. I made the connection to Kathy, made the connection with something that I could do. And then the third thing, of course, is that I realized that the Earth Keepers program was available to me. So I signed up for that. And so that was in October of 2019. And that was, again, a further awakening because I, at that point, knew about creation care, but I didn't make the connection to justice. And that was just huge for me. It was such a growth period.
Yeah. I love the way that you're naming that. I think that is what you're naming there. I think is underneath a big part of this for a lot of people is that it's the movement from, oh, God has created creation. Creation is good. Yeah, I generally agree we should care for creation, and then the realization that, oh wow, like there's a lot of lives at stake here. There's a lot of creation at stake here. There's a lot of people being wounded and hurt, and that sort of movement from some good thing to do to this radical issue of love. Sorry, I totally interrupted you, but
Well, no, that's well stated. That's well stated. It moved from there. Kathy's group had been kind of working around the edges, and they were the ones who put together the summit. And out of that, they decided to go bigger and try to make it a movement, which they have done. And so I was able to connect with her. And when I started with the tips, she already had a mailing list of about 1,000. And so I immediately had an audience, and I started doing 10 at a time. And that has worked out pretty well. And it's at first I just started with thinking of different categories. So the categories that I have, I probably won't get all of them named off the top of my head, but the categories I have are agriculture and food, and of course food waste as part of that, energy and emissions, and but I've also included the fashion industry, the investments, the how do you encourage people, what you can do with trees, water, and oceans, single-use plastics, recycling, and there's probably something else in there that I'm forgetting. Oh, yeah.
That's all.
So anyways, I had a list, and I just said, okay, I'm just going to try to get something from most of these categories in an issue. Well, as I developed, I've now been doing this for just short of a full 5 years. I've got 3 more months, and it'll be starting my 6th year doing it. And the list has also grown. The movement has grown, and the list has grown with it. And also, we picked up some people who just are on the tips list, and as well as those who are on the tips and the newsletter from the Creation Justice Movement. So we're now 2,500 every month. Yep, every month. And we get a pretty good open rate, and we get pretty good responses that are, affirming the work. One of the ways that the work has been affirmed is that several conferences in the United Methodist Church are picking it up and putting it in their newsletters. So it's kind of like you drop a little stone and out go the ripples.
Yeah.
So here's a tip for you, but I have no idea who all's getting to read it, because the idea again goes back to my experience of sitting in the pews in the United Methodist Church, where somebody wrote a tip, and I'm going, I could do that.
Yeah, that's right.
And now, it's what I say in the introduction is you can use these in any way you want. You can use them in your email signature. You can do the whole list, forward it to somebody, or you can pick and choose and put them in your worship bulletins or your newsletters, that kind of thing. So it's really a recognition that when you plant a seed like Claire did, you don't know how it's going to grow, but wow, you don't know how it's going to grow, and that's fine. One of the things I wanted to say, I want so much for this to be something that other people understand as well, and it's from 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6, and it's Paul writing to the baby Corinthian church. Yeah. And they're trying to figure out, well, who do we listen to, and who do we follow, and what do we do? And as they grow, they were having that kind of conversation, and he just sat them down literally in there through this letter and said, "I, Paul." He didn't put Paul in there. I got it in there.
Sure. Yeah.
"I, Paul, planted, and Apollos watered, but God gives the growth." And I think to myself, some days I'm Paul, and some days I'm Apollos. But always I have to just think in terms of God gives the growth. This is not about, oh, I got 2,500 on my list. It's
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
Claire planted. She had no idea where it would go. I planted, I watered, and God gives the growth.
Man, I love that you brought that up, because I think that that's just such a helpful scripture and framework period for thinking about our action in this work. And you started off by saying these Monday night dinners, and then she mentioned climate, and climate just if you start there, it really just feels so big. And it makes our lives feel so small and seemingly helpless. Again, which is why these tips are so helpful, because it's saying, oh wow, there's actually thousands of things you can be doing, and in all of these things matter. But thinking about it in that sort of framework to say, I don't have to be everything for everyone all the time, and that sometimes this work today is about, maybe we're just planting seeds here, or maybe we're just watering here. And especially if we're talking about ecological well-being, what we're talking about is not immediate gratification or immediate investment, immediate returns on our quote unquote green investments, right? We're making loads of decisions in everything we do, because everything we do is tethered with that web of life, which is creation. But these are returns that are going to come back years, decades, maybe even generations from now, and hopefully generations from now. And so I think that's sort of the gift and the struggle with earth care and wrestling with these sorts of things and conveying the importance of it, is that you're sowing seeds and you're watering plants that and these things are growing, but you may not see fruit from any of this, maybe even in your lifetime, and so that is sort of the dance, right? And so I really appreciate you brought that up.
Yeah, part of the challenge of doing the tips is I've now done 560.
Wow.
And somebody said, well, why don't you just repeat them? And it's like, okay, I can say in 10 times, the key things to do. But I want people to feel, number one, the connection to their faith. This is so important. And sometimes I'm not able to do that in an individual tip, but in the context of the 10, I'm able to do that. And I have moved from just listing tips, randomly from my categories, to beginning to put them together as a theme, so that at least the initial reader of the tips will have a sense of how this does work with being faithful people. So that's been it's been very helpful in terms of looking freshly at month after month after month. So for example, I just wanted to tell you about the ones coming up for November. Well, I love that. About October 1st. October was about scary things.
Okay.
And how action and hope are the things that you countered scary things with. So that was one thing. But with Thanksgiving, I did a different one, because I'll just read the introduction to you. November brings the anticipation of the day set aside for turkey and all the fixins, family and football. However, turning around the words to become giving thanks, and you discover new possibilities. We are invited to live every day, not just one, with an attitude of gratitude. That invitation also bids us turn our attitude into action, for which others will also be giving thanks. And then I talk about we can give thanks for churches that remind us that the earth is the Lord's. We can give thanks for those people who get knee-deep in dealing with the mounting litter in our streams, rivers, and oceans. And we can give thanks to those who look beyond their own convenience and count the cost to God's earth as they make decisions. And then that's the pattern, but each one of those tips also includes something that you can do. So, for example, give thanks for those who are knee-deep in dealing with the mounting litter. Find a waterway near you and create or join efforts to remove harmful debris. Those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the intentionality that springs forth from your work in your life, and that I think, which is what it really requires, with the work of Earth Care. And I think for a lot of us in places of privilege, quote unquote, it does require kind of research and cost analysis and doing the work and maybe getting into the spreadsheets, and giving that attention to it. And so, yeah. And I think if we're honest too, a lot of us want to help out, but maybe, we may not really want to do anything out of the way in our lives. And, if it's not convenient or on the way to work, and we are just way past that moment in history though. And, we've got to be willing to sort of, be extra intentional, I think, in some aspect, at least, of our lives. And that's what I love about these tips in your work, is that your story is that. And also there's so many different areas. It's like, just pick one of these and dig in. You don't have to do all of this, right? You don't even have to plant, back to the analogy, you don't have to plant all of these different kind of seeds. Just pick one and sow that one seed, and man, like, it can grow.
I wanted to read you two more in this series because I'm the big thing that I got out of the Earth Keepers thing was that definitely we need to be looking at justice, and definitely we need to be looking at community and pulling together people instead of thinking, well, I have to do it all, which is one of the things that you've said.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd love to hear those.
So this one is, give thanks for those who see, hear, and stand with marginalized peoples as they endure the brunt of a changing climate. Respond to disasters, definitely. Also, speak up for the necessary changes to avoid the suffering. And then the other one, give thanks for the laws, regulations, and organizations that protect or restore the natural habitats of God's creatures. With these protections, numerous marine and land animals have come back from the brink of extinction. Support those efforts so that wildlife can thrive. So you can see the range of things that I'm able to touch on. And I always figure, like you, just do one. I started, but let's expand the awareness that we have about the bigger picture and how we all need to be working together, including through things that we might not think about.
Yeah. And obviously, focusing in on this upcoming series about, Thanksgiving and gratitude. But I think we can just overlook that sometimes as just like, oh yeah, of course, let's be grateful. But But
And
man,
so
I
much
really,
for people,
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I think that really the more I do this work, the more I really feel that gratitude is, and that posture of just being grateful, like, man, that is the secret sauce of getting moving on issues of earth care, and just that for a catalyst sort of moment. And really, if you just take a minute, like, there's creation, like, it's just, there's so much to be grateful for, and there's so much to look at, and it's so regenerative. And there's a recent there's a recent study that came out that I've seen floating around, about data that's come back from 1970 to 2020 that said that we lost 74% of monitored wildlife in the last 50 years, which is insane, right? It's insane. And so I feel like these, and while, like, everyone should take a good hard look at that, and that's very sobering, but we also have to acknowledge how regenerative, and the regenerative capacity of creation is, and that how much creation quickly rebounds if we give it a chance and we protect it. And that's sort of the DNA baked into God's design of creation. And wow, that's something to be grateful for in the wake of seeing all these headlines, is to say, you know what, if we take the time to serve and keep this land and this place, amazing things can happen.
Well, one of the things that happened to me after doing the Earth Keepers and the Summer Summit and the Earth Keepers was that the group that I was working with at West End United Methodist said, we need to do some education because we are pretty sure a lot of people don't have a clue. And of course, I had to admit I didn't have a clue. But when COVID, so we decided we would do like Sunday school classes and so forth. So when COVID hit, we couldn't do that. And we found an alternative with Zoom. So I put together a series of slides and have used them multiple times. And this latest iteration, this was 4 years ago, I put it together. And this latest iteration is going into the November issue of the Creation Justice Movement newsletter as a resource for anyone who is in a position to do some educating. And they can take the slides and manipulate them so that they can make them pertinent to the local audience, or, just do a few at a time, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But what I got started saying was that doing that work forced me to really dig in and understand. And the thing that changed my whole sense was exactly what you were talking about, was how amazing nature is. So the slide deck is called God's Good Gifts. And I look at the ocean and the waterways and how they are both amazing in and of themselves, but also how they are protecting us, and how the damage that we do is pretty terrible. Look at the issues of biodiversity, and how when we care for the habitats, then the biodiversity can come back. And look at trees and plants, and how there's a phrase that they exhale so we can inhale. And so they're breathing, they're literally breathing and taking in carbon dioxide and putting out oxygen. Well, that means we can breathe.
Yes.
Because without that, we can't go on.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And that we can do to take care of our forests. And then the other area is the soil. And, people think of it's just dirt. What do you care about dirt? Well, if you could look into it deeply, you would see these amazing, amazing microbes. But some of our farming practices and other practices are really damaging those microbes. And then we get into a dust bowl kind of situation. Yeah. And so looking at just those three big things, and then putting that in the larger context of the balance that is part of, the carbon cycle, for example, but the balance that is the way nature works and how resilient it is if we don't overload the balance. And so that kind of helped me a whole lot to be able to say, well, okay, I cannot change the farming practices of agribusiness, but there are things that I can do. And just this growing awareness feeds that attitude of gratitude, because I can't do it all, but what I can do can help. And what if I can get other people involved?
That's right. Your social capital. And that need to talk about it more. Yeah. And I think you said that so well. And that's kind of what I was trying to say, is just that, I think a lot of times we see creation, or we see a sunset or something, we think, oh, that's beautiful. And there's sort of a surface level appreciation. And then we think we don't really go the next level down to see everything that there is to see. And we think, oh, that's for people who study ecology or something. But I feel like more and more, and it's obviously probably because this is like my news feed, but there's so many more studies and so many more people writing books now. And there's a deeper level of understanding. And it just comes back and says, look how just wild in both senses creation is. And can you believe that this happens, that this is what's happening in our soil, that this is how coral reefs work, that this is how, and there's just a deeper level of beauty the more we get to know the operative that is God's design. And I've heard the saying that we know less about our soil than we do about space at this point, which I would believe, especially with how we farm. But so I wondered after doing all these tips for so long at this point, I'm curious, what's some of the ones that are more closer to your heart, or that are maybe some of your favorites, or some that really just you end up talking about more than others, if there are some like that jump off the page for you?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about where I live. I'm in independent living in a senior facility that is also connected with the healthcare center. And when I first got here, the first thing I noticed was that the trees, this is my window, the trees are amazing and they're so great. But there's this whole section that is called a storm runoff area that has no trees in it at all. Well, trees will capture storm runoff. Just put trees in there.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I've been working on, but it's probably going to have to take a few years, but I'm still committed.
That's great.
The other thing that we found out was that people were interested in getting rid of styrofoam because, we have food services here. And people were taking leftovers, or, somebody was sick and they took the leftovers back to their apartment, or not leftovers, but whole meal back to their apartment, and always went in styrofoam. Well, there were enough people there who were interested in getting rid of the styrofoam. So we did the work on that. And now we have reusable green plastic containers, there's a roll for plastic that allows it to be reused, and it goes through sanitation cycle in the dishwashing and so forth. So, we've cut way down on the use of styrofoam. However, in the health center, they have different rules and regulations that they have to go by that are part of the, health, being a healthcare facility. And so my husband's been over there now for several weeks, and I just cringe at the amount of styrofoam I see, because
it's painful.
It's painful. But the other thing we did do right after we got here was to found a group of folks who were interested in composting. So we have a major kitchen that serves 800 meals a day, with the number of people we have living in independent and the number of people in the health center.
Wow.
And so we did the work to show the cost comparisons and so forth, and we made the case, and we got composting. In the first year of composting, we sent 40,000 pounds to be composted of food waste. And I think, wow, that's just huge. But it's like those three things have been really important to me, both because we've made progress on two of them. The other one is being talked about more, and it's, I can plant a tree. I can deal with my own food waste. I can, cut back on styrofoam. Those are things that I can do. And I guess those are things that I glom onto as personally important.
I'm so glad that you brought up those stories, because I think those two, speaking of, I think churches specifically as well, I think those two things, the single use, the styrofoam, and then the food waste, the compost, are probably maybe the top two, or at least in the top 5 of the issues that, I talk with churches all the time about. And, we really just get stuck there for some reason. But, and I know the issues, and I know how it all started, and why churches use single-use products. But I wonder if you would, you single-handedly basically did the math and made the Excel sheets and wrote the proposals and changed 2 separate organizations work in the world in this. And so I wonder if you could maybe dig in a little bit more here for a minute on, for listeners thinking about, like, how can I possibly get my workplace or my church to begin to think, like, what was the process of that? And maybe, you could pick one, the styrofoam and the compost, or, and maybe it was the same for both, but, like, what was the 1, 2, 3? What was the process there of figuring that out and navigating that relationship and that change?
Talk about the compost. When we first moved here, I began, making friends and all that kind of stuff, and encountering people. And they also did a little bio for everybody. So I kind of read through that, and I go, oh, she's interested in environmental things. So I began to look for people who, in conversation, for example, would say something that cued me into their interest in making changes. So I started with a group of 3 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And
you got your green team.
Got my green team. And so we went to work on composting, because that was a particular interest of one of them. I would have gone any direction, but it was a particular interest of one. And we have compost options here in Nashville where we are. So it was like, okay, let's investigate. So that was the next thing that we had to do, was to really investigate. And we had multiple choices so I did a spreadsheet and a presentation then about what the importance of it was and how this company would play out and how this company would play out. And so then I made the presentation to a larger group. There's a food committee here, for example. Well, it was just the three of us when we started, but we went to the larger committee and they got excited about it. And then we involved our executive, and he said, given the amount of money we were talking about to get it started, let's go for it. So the thing that we did after that was then to follow up with an event where the man who owns the compost company came and spoke to the residents who chose to go. So there were about 40 people. I was fairly impressed who came to that event. And then we followed up with going out to the compost company to actually see compost at work.
Oh, that's great.
And there were, I guess, 23 of us who went to that. So that kind of, start small, grow a little bigger, get the permissions, do the investigation, and then communicate what you're doing. We've put out the number of tons that we've, it's basically 20 tons in 1 year. And this last, well, I'm not going to have the statistic right off the top of my head. Yeah. And that's huge. And the other thing that we did was, because we talked about food waste, the food committee talked with our not servers, but the kitchen folks, and they offer a smaller portion size, so we're not getting as much food waste coming back. So that's
that's such a good idea.
Right. And two residents now will take personally, we can't here contribute to the food waste that it comes out of the kitchen. It has to come straight from the kitchen. We technically could, but our management said if somebody dumps it in a plastic bag,
right,
they contaminated the whole load. So you can't really trust that.
Right. Yeah. That's a whole nother level of complication.
Yeah, that's a whole level. So now at least two different people here who will take you freeze your food scraps, and on a certain day you bring in to my friend Chrissy, for example, and she will take the food scraps and take them to a local church that does do outdoor. They have an outdoor thing, and she just can dump stuff in there.
That's great.
So, trying to look for multiple ways so that more people can participate. And the more people will participate, the more they'll talk about it.
That's right.
And it grows.
Compost is just, so close to just what it means to be human. And I think we've got to normalize compost for sure. And I find there are always so many fun and funny questions about compost, I know I've said it before on here, but we just overcomplicate it. And, and you don't have to garden with it. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just let it marinate out there. You don't have to be a gardener. It'll just take care of itself. But, so what I'm hearing is you kind of found your people, your team, your friends, you investigated, you presented data. And, and I think that often it's just I don't know that I've ever heard a story of people who have done the work, presented the numbers, and then not made the change, because it's just, once you see the CO2 impact, the financial impact, and the value alignment, from just talking about single-use products and it just seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So was it similar with the styrofoam story as well?
Yes, and we were fortunate because someone in years past had this idea of using reusable uh, containers for taking out leftovers or for getting to folks who needed it in their apartment. And they had bought a bunch of them, and they had them downstairs in the garage, or basically our basement. But COVID meant that they were using so many, and they weren't getting them back because, people weren't coming and going kind of thing. And so they switched to styrofoam, and then the collective memory of people thought that all we had was styrofoam.
Mm.
So we had boxes of new containers that we were then able to pull and put into play. At first, we thought we would be able to make a complete change, but we knew we couldn't do it for the health center. But
Sure.
in the independent living, we made a pitch for making a complete change. And what we found was we've got some people who just really love their styrofoam. And we got some people who really love the green boxes and don't return them very fast.
Sure.
And we have a finite number of reusable boxes. You need people to return them so they
That's
can
right.
be sanitized, washed and sanitized. So it's not been a, what do I want to say? It's not been a straightforward switch. It's
Sure.
been a gradual mix. But as more people come, we think more people are going to, who enter into living here, we think those are people who are probably going to be excited about not having styrofoam. Whereas,
right.
so we're working with it. It's a culture change in many ways, and we're okay with that.
Right.
We would like to have done it wholesale, the way we were able to do it with the compost, but you live with it, you keep going.
That's totally true. I think more often than not, that is how it's going to look for any of these changes, is that sort of cultural shift. And those things take time, and that's okay. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there is the sort of the mix, like you're saying, and the struggle that's involved. And some changes is better than no change. And let's just embrace that piece of it and say, what's the next right step here? And I think and addressing some of those values, I think especially for local churches to talk about, what are our values here for creation? Are we valuing matter over money? Are we valuing creation over consumption? And sort of really just looking some of that in the eye. And I think often, like you said, that collective memory, we're just kind of trapped by some of that. We're only limited by our own imaginations when it comes to just opening that conversation up again and bringing in the right people, and which is key. And I always tell people, don't even try to have a recycling infrastructure conversation with your church unless you brought in the custodians and the janitors. Because I used to be a custodian for a long time, and it's like they're the gatekeepers to this whole thing, and so you're not gonna implement anything if you haven't brought them on board, because it's literally part of what they do for a living. And so, who are the people? And so, anyway,
we also did a focus on Earth Day this past year, and they'd not celebrated Earth Day before, so we made a big big banner, and had a big heart and a big planet on it, and we love Earth. And then we did a show and tell, and I've done show and tell like for a Sunday school class, for example, and just bringing in alternatives to single-use plastic, and for people to be able to touch them and feel them and talk to somebody. So we had a team of about 7 of us who were just in the atrium area, which is a common area. And people would come through and we capture them.
Yeah, that's right.
And, show them here's a compostable plastic bag. It's not plastic, but it's compostable and it replaces plastic.
Yeah.
And then here's a shampoo bar. And I use it and I love it, kind of thing. And you don't really have both the emissions from the weight of the liquid nor the waste of the plastic. Well, we did that, and that was very well received. People need to see, feel, and hear. Most important, hear from people who are trusted sources for them. So that we are part of the community, and we're doing this and telling you about it with enthusiasm makes a difference. So that's the role that any person can play. You talked about office, workplaces, school, and family, and friends in the neighborhood. Those are the places where we are planting seeds, and we are able to encourage and water for somebody else's good ideas too.
Oh, that's really good. Crys, I'm telling you, you're just generating ideas in me as we're talking here. So I love that. Yeah, I think the whole come and see aspect is another low-hanging fruit. So maybe you feel like you're a quote-unquote green advocate wherever it is where you're living or working or going to church. Like, just how can you turn in, kind of like you said, you guys took a field trip out to see the composting, like organize something, and I think that there is that, I think you named it really well, that trusted source, that come and see, and I'm even thinking like so many churches, they're using styrofoam, but they have a kitchen full of actual real dishes and mugs that they're just collecting dust. So what would it look like to have a soft opening, right? Have a soft opening one Sunday where you just brought them out, see how it went, see who your helpers were getting the dishes washed, and just play around with it, give yourself permission to do something there. And
one of the things that I think churches don't realize is that the business of working together. So you're doing the dishes. Well, everybody complains about doing the dishes, but we all know it's essential. And then on top of that, if you do it as a group, it's fun. And people talk and they chatter, and it becomes a bonding experience. There's I think it's called Bowling Alone. It's a book and a concept. Let's just talk about the concept, because I might not get the right book. But the idea was that when we played together and had, just easy interactions with one another, it helped to build community. Whereas when we're separated, then we can get into the divisiveness that has been such a problem. So if everybody just dumps their stuff in the trash and somebody else out there takes care of it, you are essentially isolating. Whereas if you come to a meal and you help get it set up, and then you help clear, and you enjoy the meal together, and then you wash dishes together, and maybe take the stuff out to the back of the church to compost, it builds community, and people enjoy it, and the bonds are stronger.
Absolutely. I would testify to that personal experience as well. That's so good. It enriches. I think it enriches a community, those kinds of aspects. Well, I know we probably need to turn a corner here and kind of wrap things up, but yeah, I think one of the most striking parts about your story is that this is a new chapter for you later in your life. And I think that's one of the things that really stands out to me and is really encouraging. And so I wonder, as someone who, is a grandparent, who's a little older, who this kind of like 5 years ago in 2019, your kind of your whole trajectory really just kind of changed. Yeah, I think that's just really encouraging. I wonder what you might say to others who are kind of getting up there, a little older, thinking about like, I mean, I feel like it's really rare, and so I just wonder what sort of word of encouragement you might have there for us.
Well, when I retired, I was 62, and I had a really meaningful career, and I took with me some freelance work. So it was kind of a sweet deal. I could, really concentrate on less and enjoy that and find some balance in my life. But when that went away, I was kind of bereft. Like, okay, I've always found it essential to have a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, that I don't want to sit around. Sitting around will kill you. So, and it's just not my value structure. So I began looking at different possibilities, and the 10 years of volunteering at Saddle Up were a part of that. But then when this all came up, it was like, aha, you've had these skills. You have this desire to make the world a better place. And here is an opportunity. And I was open to it and excited about it. Having the community of the creation justice movement, and now the community here at Richland Place, was huge. And of course, my husband has always been very supportive. But being able to look at my life not as like, oh, here's the pinnacle and now we're on the downhill slide. It is, physically, I'm turning 79 in a month, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, I could look at it that way, and you never know. The truth is, you never know when your time is up or when your abilities are up. But at the same time, to live richly every moment. And for me, that means these things that I've reiterated. It means having the social connections, having meaning and purpose, and having things that draw me out of myself in terms of physical as well are really important. And my husband always said, you don't retire from something, you retire to something. Took me a while to figure out what that to was, but I think looking for it and seeing even the little things could make a difference really has fed my soul.
Yeah. I wonder too if you'd be willing to share. I remember you mentioned to me when we first had coffee around, intentionally kind of downsizing as well. Was that kind of part of that journey?
Yeah, it's pretty much more my husband's area. But when we had always talked about being in community, and friends of ours invited us to consider Richland Place, and so we did, because they told us it would be a 4 to 5 year wait on the waiting list. And so we said, oh, okay, by then we'll be in our mid-80s. We'll, that's about right. Yeah. But we went ahead and started looking at the potential for what that meant. And for us, it meant downsizing from a 1,600 square foot plus an attic, 1,600 square feet, to a space that's 1,130. So we knew we needed to get rid of some things, and we've tried hard not to be the person who has cluttered, but you build up your stuff.
Yeah.
So, and the more we became aware of how our stuff can be a problem for how we live and for our environment, because we're not shopping. We're not shopping all the time. We were eager to do that. Ed kept a record of what we did to downsize, and had a lot of really good reflections on that, because one of the things, for example, is loss. You can have a sense of loss. You can have a sense of physical loss. You can have a sense of loss of your neighborhood or your community, loss of your home. So much of that is involved in tangible ways with our stuff.
That's right.
So he put together a book, and the title of it was Downsizing Made Easy. And of course, that's Ed Zinkiewicz.
Okay. I see. Nice.
And it's stress less, live better. And it's a little book that chronicles in some ways our journey, but it also offers a whole lot of practical stuff. So that's been a part of his sense of finding meaning and purpose, is helping other people make the transition to something that is kinder to the earth and kinder to the...
Yes, that's really great. And I'm going to link that in the show notes, as well as, your creation care tips, so that we can get more people on those tips, because, man, that's where the juice is. And so, I really appreciate hearing that. And I think you named that really well. I think that that's the overarching struggle, I think, a lot for many of us here in, especially the global north, as far as like, how do we, it's very countercultural, but how do we become less? We all have just so much more than we really need. How do we become less? And obviously, the older we get, nature, gravity imposes itself on us, and that's going to happen anyway. But what would it look like to embrace that earlier on? What would it look like to see our whole lives as about in that more sustainable relationship with our stuff and with our time? And I don't think there's any coincidence that we find that we're a little bit more happier, maybe even a little bit more healthier, the more that we embrace that sort of quote unquote downward mobility. I think there's a lot of Jesus in that conversation as well. Anyway, so encouraged by talking with you and about your story and your work, and I'm just so thankful that you carved out some time to hang out with me, Crys.
It was great. Thank you, Caleb. And I appreciate what you were doing too.
Oh, right on. Well, we'll make this again. We're going to get together for brunch. It's gonna happen.
Right.
Thanks so much for listening, friends. I hope again that you'll take a moment and just share this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this, or someone who should be connecting with these tips that Crys is producing in the world, because, man, there's just so much here for us to glean from. And so I hope you'll take a moment for that. Grace and peace, friends.